For the love of the awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Faraj al-Sharif, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي كان موجودا قبل حدوث الأشياء ويبقى بعد فناء الأشياء تفرد بالأوليات والقدم ووسم كل شيء ما عداه بالفناء والعدم كما قال عز شأنه كل شيء هالك إلا وجهه وكل نفس ضائقة الموت وقال كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذي الجلال والإكرام سبحان من لا يخفى عليه اختلاف النيات ولا يعزب عنه معاصي العباد في الخلوات سبحان الله الذي منه خلقت العباد وإليه المعاد فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة خيرا يره ومن يعمل مثقال ذرة شرا يره نشهد أن لا إله إلا هو الملك الذي لا ينازع في ملكه ولا يضاد في حكمه ونشهد أن محمدا سيد المرسلين وخير المبشرين والمنذرين صلى الله عليه وآله الهداة المهديين من ركب سفينتهم نجا واهتدى ومن تخلف عنها ضل فغرق وهوى إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected teachers, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Usikum bittaqwa Allah wal wara'a fi dinikum. I call myself and all of you towards God consciousness and piety in the way of the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This week, our union of our four countries has been rocked by the testimony of the former senior advisor to the Prime Minister, Dominic Cummings, and his admission to the incompetence that was prevalent throughout government, which has ended in the death of more than 150,000 people and long COVID of more than 1 million people. And of course, we will never know the effects internationally that have occurred on the types of leadership that have gone before. One of the challenges that we have across all of our communities is the question of integrity in leadership and the quality of leadership that we are producing. When we take a step back and try to reflect on what this past week has demonstrated to us, what we actually find is that the very person who not only the cabinet and the Prime Minister and a large proportion of our news media considered to be so eminently truthful that when it came to the issue of Bernard Castle, for example, they considered him to be so eminently truthful that they were willing to place their own integrity on the rise and the fall of Dominic Cummings' own integrity. And only several months later, maybe a year later now, we find this very same individual telling the world that these very same people that he had been working with, nay, he had placed into position, were incompetent and should never have been in the leadership positions that they were in the first place. And now, the nation and the media and the political commentariat has to wrangle with the question of whom do you believe? Do you believe the testimony of Boris Johnson, for example? Or do you believe the testimony of Dominic Cummings? The answer is not whether we believe one or the other, or we believe both of them, or we consider both of them are lying. This is not the issue at hand. The issue at hand is both of them are now in survival mode and are willing to tell you whatever it takes for them to survive in the political class and for their reputations to remain. I want you to reflect on this question, or maybe these two questions. How did we get here? How did we get here so fast? From the Islamic perspective, once the coup occurred against the household of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, and the official position of the commander of the faithful was snatched from him, it took 60 years, or maybe rather 50 years, to get from that point to the massacre of Karbala. We often ask ourselves, how did it reach that point where the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who has ayat after ayat revealed about him, how ahadith about him are so superlative that there are no narrations in the history of Islam that can compare to the narrations that are mentioned about Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and the predictions, the prophecies regarding Karbala are so many from the Prophet and from Imam Ali alayhi salam that they actually reach tawatur. There is absolute certainty in the historical narrative of the prediction of Karbala, yet it only took 50 years to get from point A to point B. The question has to be, how does something like this happen so fast? And what we come to realize is that the central pin between all of this is the integrity and the quality of leadership that sits there. Prior to Yazid ibn Muawiyah was Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. And so the doors that Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan opened and the floodgates that came with it allowed for Yazid ibn Muawiyah to do what he did. And of course, it was those prior to Muawiyah that allowed Muawiyah into position in the first place, that of course allowed Muawiyah to be able to do what he was going to be able to do. There is a hadith about the commander of the faithful, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh. Once, one of the mu'arrikheen and the historians gives us a narration from one of those in Kufa, and he says that the elders in Kufa were the ones who really wronged Ali ibn Abi Talib. That's interesting, isn't it? Because Kufa was supposed to be with Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, and of course it was Damascus that was against Ali ibn Abi Talib, salamullahi alayhi. One of those, he says, it was the seniors, it was the elders. When we say elders here, we don't mean in age, we mean in terms of the position in the tribes, right? It was the elders of the community, the figureheads of the community, that were the ones who did Ali ibn Abi Talib wrong. He explains in the hadith, he says, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, when he became the governor, or when he became the caliph rather, he made sure that there was absolute equality amongst everyone when it came to how much money he would give to them as a monthly stipend from the public treasury, the Baytul Mal. However, all of those whom Ali ibn Abi Talib gave equality to, Muawiyah in Damascus would give them 2,000 dirham per month on top. So over a period of time, with the extra money that they were getting from Muawiyah, even though he's in Damascus, and they are actually in the city of Ali ibn Abi Talib, in Kufa, where the seat of Khilafat actually is, because they were giving 2,000 dinar a month on top of the salary that they were getting from the Caliph, over a period of time, their focus, their attention, their cravings turned towards Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. Of course, it was not long between that event of Muawiyah providing 2,000 extra coins a month to every leading individual who was previously with Ali ibn Abi Talib, and Kufa itself abandoning Aba Abdullah al-Husayn salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. Think about this very carefully. How did we get here? How did we get to this point where the country has to wrangle between two of the people who are considered to be the biggest liars, or those who have been the ones that have shaped the conflict in this country over the last 5 years? The only reason as to why a person like Boris Johnson is in position in the first place is because of Dominic Cummings. And this is the same group of people that when it came to the Brexit debate told us we don't need experts anymore. The public is tired of experts. When you have that mantra circulating inside the discourse of the nation, and when you remove expert opinion in order to get Brexit through, and then tomorrow a pandemic hits and you don't have the expertise in place in order to deal with a situation like this, you end up with these sorts of people in charge. It is no different in the religious context to the secular context. When you remove people with integrity and honesty, when you remove people of character and people who take leadership responsibly and seriously, and instead you place in their positions people who are unconcerned, people who do not have the best interests of the community at large, the outcome in the religious community will be no different to what has occurred in our own union over these last 15 months. When a pandemic hits, when a challenge hits, those who are in responsibility will not be capable of dealing with the religious issue at hand. This leads us to a very important point. Something that I intend to pick up on more, InshaAllah, as the time allows us, the space allows us for that discussion. And I will only give an ishara to it for you and I to think about and reflect on in these coming weeks. We often have people in our community that will say, I do not put myself forward for the position, rather I am a kingmaker. Have you heard that term? I am a kingmaker. What does that mean, I am a kingmaker? It means I'm the one who sits behind and I am the puppet master. I put the people in their positions. I make sure the votes go in this direction. Fine. A person who considers themselves to be the kingmaker needs to be very, very cognizant of whom they are making as king. When Dominic Cummings says that I and Boris Johnson were incompetent and should never have been in position in the first place, it tells you something about the psychology of the individual who either knew that in advance and did not care, or came to realize it afterwards. And if he came to realize it afterwards, then we again must ask, at what point did he come to realize this? Because if he realized it 12 months ago during the pandemic, in April, when he admits, quote, we still did not have a plan, why are you telling us this 12 months later? If you know that you are not capable of leading the country through the pandemic, and the people you have put in place are not capable of leading you through the pandemic, and quote, the health secretary should have been fired 15 or 20 times by now, why have you only told us this after 150,000 deaths? And the answer is, of course, that he realizes the writing is on the wall. He realizes that history is not going to be kind to him, and that very soon, when a public inquiry comes, everything will be, or what will be made available to us, will be shown. And it is better to jump ship now and try to save some integrity now, some face now. The reality is, brothers and sisters, national security and national health have been pawns in their Game of Thrones. And as a result, it has been you and I and our family and our loved ones and our friends who have been sacrificed in their games. And what's worse is that there will be no serious holding to account of these people, at least not in the immediate future, and at least not in front of our eyes now. What I want to be able to talk about for 5 minutes before we conclude the khutbah is a particular series of verses of the Holy Quran, which is about the quality of leadership, or the example of the qualities of leadership, particularly when it comes to Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam. And I just want to show you 2 or 3 verses where you will see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala points to us about the qualities that need to be invested in our communities. Which means we have to invest them in ourselves personally, for we are all leaders individually, in our family units, in our communities. And tomorrow the opportunity will avail itself for us to take different roles. And without availing ourselves to the knowledge of what the Quran says about the qualities of leadership, and really ensuring that our personalities, our traits are based upon these, then when the opportunity avails us tomorrow to take leadership roles, we will not have those qualities within ourselves that will be needed at that time. In chapter number 27, Surah An-Naml, from verses 20 to 30, you will see the story famously of the hudhud, the hoopoe, the bird that is sent by Sulaiman alayhi salam to Lady Bilqis alayhi salam, and the instructions that are given to him. In verse 23, the hudhud reports back to Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam, I found a woman ruling over this community, and I found that their people were prostrating towards the sun, and that Satan, specifically, were زُيِّنَ لَهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ أَعْمَالَهُمْ, and that shaitan has made their deeds fair seeming to them. Everything that they do is being justified by the whispers of shaitan. Now, think about this very carefully. All of us have close confidants, don't we? We have people that we rely on to help us in every part of our life: family, work, friends, communities. They will come and tell us, we have seen this incident, we have seen this issue, we are aware of this problem. They will come and report it to us. Now imagine you have actually sent this person to be your eyes and ears on the ground. Right? As is the case with Sulaiman alayhi salam. He sent the hudhud, go and check out what's happening beyond. He comes back with a report, correct? Hudhud comes back and says, I have seen there is a woman who is leading over the community, and that their community are worshipping the sun, and that they allow Satan to basically control the way in which they do things. What is interesting now is the reply of Sulaiman alayhi salam to the Hudhud. Verse number 27. Qala, Sulaiman alayhi salam says, Sananzuru asadaqta am kunta min al-kadhibin. Sulaiman, after hearing this information from the hoopoe, says, soon we will see whether you have told the truth or you are amongst those who have made something false up. Go with this letter of mine, idhab bi kitabi hadha, and give it to her, to Bilqis, turn away from them, and then wait to see what their response is back to us. So simple, right? I mean, it's not rocket science here, what's being said. The narrative is quite simple. But the mutadabbir, the ponderer of the Quran, stops and tries to think deeply about what is being said within this conversation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not have encapsulated this, eternalized it in revelation, had it not had layer after layer after layer of depth for you and I. The first thing we find is that even though the hoopoe is actually working on behalf of Sulaiman has given him this responsibility, this narrative, Sulaiman alayhi salam doesn't yet believe one report. Even though you are my agent on the ground, it's not that I don't trust you, but one person's report is not significant enough, it's not sufficient for me to make a decision about these individuals. You have given me a report. Instead of now my making a problem for them, or rather than me making this amongst my group and speaking ill about this group, what does he do? He sends the hoopoe directly back to them with his find out directly from them whether they are truly worshipping the sun or not. Sulaiman alayhi salam is not interested in the gossip. He's not interested in the infighting. Immediately, I will go and seek the truth of the matter. Even though my own confidant has told me something, I am still going to check it directly with the people that have been spoken about. Phenomenal. Imagine how many problems we could alleviate in the community if just this one example was heeded. This one example was taken. You hear of a problem, you see a tweet, you see a message, you see an email, the whole community gets entangled into it, as opposed to that one person just going directly to the source and saying, I have heard this, can you clarify it for me? اذهب بكتابي هذا فألقه إليهم. Take this communication of mine, gift it to them. ثم تولى عنهم. And then turn aside from them. Leave them alone for a while. فانظر ماذا يرجعون. And then wait to see what their answer to the communication is. Now think about this. Why would a prophet of God tell them, or tell this hudhud, just wait. Turn away from them. Wait and then bring back their response. Very simple. The hudhud should not be imposing upon them. He should allow them their genuine space to confer amongst themselves, that they can be honest and speak truthfully amongst themselves, and then bring back the communication back to Prophet Sulaiman. Allowing them to be able to think through the matter without pressure, rather than pressurizing the opposition into a quick outcome such that they would not be able to deal with what they need to be able to deal with in time, in fairness to themselves. Justice comes from Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam here. The point I want to make is that what we can see happening outside of us, in our own nation, we have to reflect on how such leadership comes into place and what the effects of that leadership is upon the community, upon the nation, upon the integrity of the nation, upon the relationship of people between themselves as the outcome of this leadership. And what you can see that has happened over this last 5 years tells you that people are not immune from the types of leadership that comes to them. For you and I, when it comes to our own communities, we need to ensure that the very best possible leadership is available to us, that we train ourselves to become fully cognizant and capable of the challenges of our time, and that the most important thing in our qualities of leadership is the integrity and the honesty that comes with our leadership. Tomorrow, you will take a leadership role. Tomorrow, I will take a leadership role. And without that integrity and that honesty, without us referring back to the Quran and the Ahadith to know how to be able to mold ourselves in leadership, we may end up causing the types of disasters that we can see has been caused by people like Dominic Cummings, Boris Johnson, and the rest of their cabinet. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we can improve ourselves, and that when we pick our leadership, that they have the integrity and the qualities that are required of them for the challenges of the time. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal asr. Innal insana lafi khusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلي يا ربي على خيرتك من خلقك محمد وآله الطاهرين. Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam. My respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Both Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings, as well as the members of the cabinet, are all now in the mode of self-protection. And what this means is that they realize that with the potential of a public inquiry and with the potential of more and more things coming out, they have one of two choices, and that is to be open and honest, or that is to protect their own selves. Dominic Cummings was asked in his interview to be completely open and honest. What he was asked was, will you give up your phone and show us all of the communications that you have had with journalists? Why? Because he said that when it comes to my and this government's dealing with journalists, we have only ever spoken to them about the things that need to be qualified, the things that need to be corrected in the public opinion. And so he was asked, will you now give up your phone to be able to prove that if everything has been done in the spirit of good communication, then you will show us this. Four times, Dominic Cummings refused and said that when it comes to the public inquiry, that is when I will be obligated. And even then, I, Dominic Cummings, will be the one to choose what I give to that inquiry, because my phone is my phone. You would not expect to give up your phone, so why should I give up my phone? I want you to understand and think about these things, because this shows us what is occurring or what is going to occur next. That of course certain things will next be leaked in order to protect Cummings' position and in order to be able to throw enough mud on certain people that allows Cummings to show, well, yes, I take my responsibility, but these were the people to blame. I'm not to blame. I was but the advisor. I was but the kingmaker. So you can expect to see that happen next. this also draws into question the way in which you and I think about democracy. Dominic Cummings is not paid privately. He is paid by you and by me, by our taxes. This is public money, which means his role was supposed to be for the benefit of the public, which means that those communications actually belong to us. If you are speaking to journalists about the interests of the country, national security, health security of the country, then actually it is being done on our behalf. We get to see what you said to those journalists, not what you choose to be able to release. Why do I bring this up? Of course, for you to be able to think about what is going to occur next, but also the integrity of our own leadership in our own communities. I should not have to battle in order to see what the leadership of this country has communicated in order to find out what has actually been said, what was true and what was false, what personally affected me, what actually potentially put me at harm's way and my loved ones in harm's way. In the same way, when it comes to our own community leadership, transparency and honesty has to be at the center of everything that occurs. When our own leadership and their private communications or their communications about the interests of our own community are not made available to us, what is the difference between them and what Dominic Cummings is telling us? If a person is truly invested in the community and what they are doing is for the sake of the community, then the communications about the community matters would also be made available to you and not considered to be secretive. I tell you this again to remind myself and to remind you that when it comes to the role of leadership in the community, the standards that are set, not the standards that are set outside by these people. Standards are set by the Quran, by the Prophet, by Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullahi alayhi. The way in which Ali ibn Abi Talib used to be open and communicating with his own officers, with his own people, the way in which he used to write to them and the instructions that were given, all of this was made available. There was only one time in which secrecy was held, and that was in a time of war. There's a hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. Imam Ali alayhi salam was talking about the secrets that need to be held on the battlefield. The hadith says he enters the battlefield in the battle of Siffin and he cries out with a loud voice. He says, "Today I am going to kill Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan and his army." And then he lowered his voice and he said, "InshaAllah." Someone came to him and said, "Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, why did you shout this part? Why did you keep this part quiet?" He said, "When you're on the battlefield, when you're in the state of war, there are some things that need to be known, and there are some things that you keep closer to yourself." Right? These people, they don't believe in God anyway. What difference does it make to them if they hear the name of God? But to strike fear into their hearts, that was my tactic, by calling them out by name. But there are tactics that need to be held. You and I need to learn. And when we see what is happening outside that are being used, we need to ensure that our communities are held back from that, are protected from those types of tactics, so that we don't end up like our own communities, like what is happening outside of us. For if we do, then our communities will be no different, no better than what is occurring in Whitehall today, what we've been seeing occurring in these last 15 months. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi alladhi la ilaha illa huwal halimul kareem, ghafirud dhanbi wa qabilut tawb. سبحان من سبقت رحمته غضباه وبسط اليدين بالرحمة. سبحان من لم يكلف نفسا دون وسعها وعفى عن السيئات ولم يجازي بها. سبحان من لا يزداد على معاصي العباد إلا كرما وجوده، وعلى كثرة الذنوب إلا عفوا وصفحة. نشهد أن لا إله إلا هو العطوف على العباد بجوده، والعواد على المذنبين بحلمه. ونشهد أن محمدا وحبيبه وأشهد أن محمدا نبيه وحبيبه سيد المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين، بعثه رحمة للعالمين صلى الله عليه وآله. اللهم صل على سيد المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين محمد صلى الله عليه وآله، وعلى إمام المسلمين وقائد الغر المحجلين أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب صلوات الله عليه وآله، وعلى سيدة نساء العالمين وبدعة خاتم النبيين سيدتنا فاطمة بنت رسول الله صلوات الله عليها، وعلى الحسن المجتبى والحسين الشهيد بكربلاء، وعلي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي عليهم الصلاة والسلام. اللهم صل على مولانا صاحب الزمان، ماحي آثار البدع والطغيان، هادم بنية الشرك والنفاق، حاسد فروع البغي والشقاق، صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى آبائه الكرام اتصل الليالي والأيام. اللهم عجل فرجه وسهل مخرجه، واجعلنا من المستشهدين بين يديه. اللهم اجعلنا ممن يذكر فتنفعه الذكرى. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي، يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه.